Welcome to the Exit Strategy, your no bullshit guide to divorce with the experienced attorneys from New Direction Family Law. Unfiltered discussions to help you move from victim to victorious and from bitter to better.
I'm Sarah Hink from the attorneys at New Direction Family Law. I have with me again on this episode Ava Jennette, another attorney at New Direction Family Law. Welcome, Ava.
Thank you.
Elizabeth is still in her trial as of 20 minutes ago when we recorded the last episode. But we are here to talk to you today about a topic we have discussed in the past, domestic violence. But today we're going to go more about the procedural side of it and obtaining a domestic violence protective order. Obviously, there's a lot of issues that surround domestic violence. Since we have those past episodes, I think it's good for people to listen to them if they're in this scenario, because it deals with, all aspects of domestic violence, the cycle of abuse, resources out there. But today we're going to try and stay within the procedural side just to give people some knowledge if this is something they want to pursue on their own, if they don't have the funds to hire an attorney, and what they can do out there in any other counties in North Carolina if we don't practice there. So tell us a little bit about your experience with domestic violence protective orders.
Yeah. So I have been practicing for about 2 years, and I've done quite a few of these. I've both, been on the side where we're asking for one and defended against a few of them as well. And they're always, difficult cases, I think, on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with if you're pursuing a domestic violence protective order. Where do people start? Where can we give people some resources to start in moving forward with that?
Yeah. So I would say if you're, in Wake or like Johnston County, or other North Carolina counties, I would reach out to your local domestic violence resource center. In Wake, it's Interact. In Johnston County, it's Harbor. I believe Harnett has one as well, and I'm sure most counties have some sort of resource. So I would reach out to them first because they can give you information on filling out the paperwork, and they can also give you a lot of resources for like how to leave safely and counseling, like all sorts of stuff. So I would definitely reach out to them first.
Yeah, a lot of those resources out there do have advocates to assist with completing the complaint for a domestic violence protective order. The complaint is generally an AOC form, as we call it. It's just a standardized form that is available from the state for people to fill out. And it will ask basic questions for you to, answer, allegations that you need to include. One of them is your relationship to the defendant, husband, wife, roommates, share a child in common. There's also, mother, father is an option as well. And you can file on behalf of a minor child as well. Have you had those cases?
I have. I'm trying to think. I don't think I have had where I was representing a victim, but I did defend against one where we had a minor child as the person seeking the DVPO.
So procedurally, when you represent a child in a domestic violence protective order, there are some issues that can complicate that. So if you're listening and that is falling into your area, definitely speak to an attorney about how to do that, whether or not you need to be appointed as a guardian ad litem for the child when you file. But otherwise, like we said before, it's a form. You put the allegations, and what are some certain allegations out there that would fall under domestic violence?
Yeah. So first of all, too, I would be as specific as possible, listing dates to the best of your recollection, that sort of thing. But list anything that has, obviously physical violence or threats of physical violence are sort of the most important thing to put there. But also any harassing behavior that has been like really emotionally distressing to you. Things like calling you 30 times. I've seen that one pop up before. Things like posting, had a case where the other party posted sensitive photos to like the victim's social media, horrible stuff like that. So, any harassing behavior in addition to any violence is important to put on there.
Yeah, and like you said, dates, be specific. And you can go back in the past.
Yes.
The courts definitely want to hear the most recent act of domestic violence, but you want to list any dates or anything that's happened in the past as well. And if you don't recall the exact date for some reason, you can always just say August of 2025. Well, we aren't there yet. So we go back in time, August of 2023, this happened, and kind of show this behavior is a pattern, because that's obviously a big indication that there is abuse in the relationship if it is an ongoing pattern of harassment, the multiple texts or multiple calls, like you stated before, throwing things in the house, just slamming their hand on tables, like in these acts of aggression can be seen as domestic violence under the statute, and also how you perceive them if you're in fear of this person,
Yes.
and the emotional distress they are causing you. So you want to make sure you fill all that information out on the complaint. And what sort of relief can you ask for on that complaint?
Yeah, so you can ask for a lot of different stuff. Kind of the main thing that comes up a lot is you can get custody of a minor child in these. It only lasts for a year, but that is something the court can provide in certain circumstances. You can get things like custody of a pet. If y'all own a pet together, you can have possession of the house that y'all live in certain circumstances. The court can order your abuser to not come to your place of work, your child's school, daycare, your relatives' homes, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. And so the possession of the house, that doesn't mean that you get the house
Yes.
and the equity and all the money if the house is owned, right?
Correct.
Just means you get to stay there until
Yeah.
there's further order of the court.
Yes.
So say we fill out our complaint, we make all these allegations, and we're going to talk like we're in Wake County because that's where we practice the most. What's the process for that? You take it down to the courthouse, you file it, then what happens?
Yeah. So typically what happens is once you file it, the clerks are going to send you over to a courtroom. And at that point, you'll actually go in front of the judge and ask them for something called an ex parte domestic violence protective order. And that's essentially just like a temporary protective order, but it will give you some protection, assuming you get it, for roughly 10 days until you come back for the return hearing. So I would be prepared when you go to file to be ready to talk to a judge and kind of explain why you're wanting this. Any evidence that you could have could be useful there too.
Right. And so the defendant or the abuser is not in the courtroom during this
Right.
process. It's just the person that's filed the complaint, and they, that same day, go in front of a judge. Judge reads the complaint, asks questions, listens to the person filing the complaint, and based on what they say, they will enter or deny an ex parte order.
Right.
So we get our ex parte order, then what happens?
Yeah. So like I said, about 10 days later, it could be shorter, but you'll come back for a return hearing, assuming that your abuser has been served. So this is one thing I like to prepare people for, because it could influence what you need to do for the rest of the day. But typically the sheriff's office will try to serve them fairly quickly. So I would be prepared to like be away from the home where they're going to be served, or just sort of be aware that that could happen within, I'd say like they're fairly fast. Maybe 24 hours isn't uncommon.
Yeah, typically.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the last one that I filed took like 3 days.
Of course.
Yeah, but it should be pretty quick. And, have the kids out of the house. The
Yeah.
sheriff's going to come. You don't want to be around them if you don't need to be.
Right.
Or if the kids are with them, like perhaps you've already separated and it's his custodial time or her custodial time. Make sure that you are available to take the kids
Right.
in that
Absolutely.
situation. So we get service,
Yep.
and then the court date, we'll know the court date when we get the ex parte order. And then the defendant will know the court date because he'll be on the paperwork served, correct?
Right. Correct. So when you show back up for that hearing, I would expect the other side to be there. I would go in, have as much evidence as you can, have photos of things if possible. Any, like, if you have like Ring video camera, something like that is helpful. Text messages, all of that is great. And I would have it printed out if possible. This, helps you stay organized when you're talking to the judge and like lets them see what you're talking about. So yeah, you will actually have a hearing. You'll talk to the judge. The other side will get an opportunity to question you, and you'll get an opportunity to question them if they testify. And then the judge makes their decision.
Right. And so obviously this is the biggest part. And some people will file on their own and then hire an attorney in that time frame to represent them on the return hearing, as we call it, that 10-day return hearing, because that's when you do want your evidence to be tight. You want everything to be correct and available to the judge. Make sure that you are putting in evidence and testimony that is going to fall under the domestic violence statute for you to get that order.
Yes.
And as for the defendant, say that you are served with a ex parte domestic violence protective order, and we've called them their abuser, but sometimes we understand that domestic violence protective orders can be used as a double-edged sword, right? So you mentioned before that you can get custody through it. So sometimes people might file a domestic protective order to obtain custody, and maybe there wasn't actually domestic violence, and it can be used to get possession of the house and kick out your spouse if they're refusing to leave when there wasn't actually domestic violence.
Yeah.
So walk us through what that would look like.
Yeah. So my first piece of advice would be to talk to an attorney, if possible, because these can have long-lasting ramifications. Not, I mean, I guess to scare people kind of, but it is a potential that if the other side gets one of these, you could not see your kids for several months. Like, it's important to get legal advice if you can. If you're not able to do that, I would say, read through the other side's complaint as rationally as possible. If what they're saying isn't true, try to bring evidence or witnesses you have to show that it's not true. Sometimes that's really hard. Just bringing anything you can to try to kind of negate their allegations is helpful.
Yeah.
Hey guys, it's Cam with New Direction Family Law. Let's face it, divorce affects a lot of people, myself included. My parents were divorced. I've been there. There's no easy way around it. It just sucks. But determining the finances of one household splitting into two can be one of the most stressful issues of divorce. Will alimony or child support have to be paid? Who gets the house and the cars? Who has to pay all the credit card debt or any other debt? Do I get to keep all of my retirement? These are all important questions that you need answered going into a divorce. And it's so important that you're represented by an experienced family law attorney that can answer these questions for you and help you develop a plan specifically for you and your situation to move forward. New Direction Family Law has over 80 years of experience protecting the rights of our clients when going through a divorce. We aggressively advocate, we support and educate our clients to achieve the best possible outcomes. So give us a call today to schedule an initial consultation at 919-719-3470. You can click the link in the episode description, or you can reach out to us on our website at newdirectionfamilylaw.com.
And if you're served at home and they have the ex parte, you're going to have to leave your house.
Yeah.
The cops will stay there with you and they'll wait for you to go pack your bags, and you got to get out of there.
Yep.
And you cannot communicate with a person that filed that domestic violence protective order and got an ex parte, can you?
No, and definitely do not, under any circumstances, communicate with them.
Not through third parties, not via social media. Do not. Even if you don't think the allegations are true, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So say that someone does do that. They start texting their ex and, hey, why'd you file that? What are you doing? You know I didn't do any of these things. Blah, 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 blah. Text. What could happen?
Yeah. So you could get arrested and face criminal charges for that. A violation of a protective order is criminal, and you could get some jail time for that potentially. So do not do that. Also, even if, your ex who filed this, even if she texts you and is like, or he texts you and he's like, I'm sorry, like, I'm going to drop it, don't respond. Like, they can't give you permission to waive that. So go radio silence.
Radio silent for sure. And they don't get in trouble. Some
Right.
people think that the person that files for the protective order can't communicate with you either, but that's not the case. They can. There's no ramifications for them if they talk to you while the protective order is in place. But you can also use that as a defense, right? Like, this person's not scared of me. Look, she started texting me even after she filed.
Right.
Asking all these questions or wanting to see me. So that can also be used as evidence for what happens after the ex parte is entered. And something important for people to know is that the actual domestic violence protective order, complaint orders that stem from it are civil orders. So it's not, people get concerned about their employment, which they should be, but it's not something that's going to show up on a criminal background check.
Right.
But what will show up on the criminal background check is if you violate it, and then you get a criminal charge for violating the protective order.
Yes, for sure.
And you can even spend time in jail, especially if you do it more than once.
Yes.
It's just like a lot of other crimes where it builds up and misdemeanors turn into felony, and just depending on what you're doing. And so that can be very problematic for people's future and for their jobs.
Absolutely. And I can't stress enough, dude. Like, I really would err on the side of caution because, we've seen violations for things like logging into somebody's shared account, has done it. Magistrates, who are the people that are typically making, finding the criminal acts, aren't, necessarily super well versed in that area. And so you can get violated really easily. So just like try very hard not to do anything.
Nothing at all. And don't try to be sneaky. Doing IT
Nope.
stuff. I feel like people these days just like try to log into Ring cameras, or you're still looking at the Ring camera at the house and doing those sorts of things. Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't send them money. Even like that can be a communication.
Right.
Yeah.
On the, I've had those cases and I argue, okay, well, it's for a legitimate purpose. Like there's a child support order. He needs to pay child support.
Right.
So there are defenses to that as well, but it can, like you said, end up in the hands of the wrong person to make that decision on the front end. And you just want to avoid it at all costs. So that's why if you can't afford an attorney and you're a defendant, hire an attorney.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
And also if this is one of those cases where someone's filed it as leverage in a family law case for custody or to obtain property, we can show that in court. And the judges look for that. They know.
Absolutely.
And so that can look bad on that other person for doing that. So just, stand your ground and get an attorney.
Yep.
Play it safe. Don't make those communications to the other party. Be very careful about what you do. So at the return hearing, everyone gets their chance to provide testimony, evidence. What happens when the judge enters that order? What can we expect?
Yeah. So, I mean, if a judge enters an order granting you a domestic violence protective order, you can expect some of the same things that I talked about earlier, custody, possession of a house, possession of pets, things like that. That being said, though, even if and I know this kind of goes a little bit off topic with custody, but like if you do get a custody order in there, know that it can be modified through a family court action. So, if you're the defendant, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to see your kid for a year. And if you're the person filing a DVPO, it also doesn't mean that like your custody schedule is protected for a year.
Right. Thus there's consent orders that the defendant can say, okay, fine, I'll consent to a protective order and there won't be findings of fact. So it won't say that he or she, abused the other person. So you're voiding a hearing, but you're consenting to the protective order. And in that case, a lot of times we do work out some kind of temporary custody schedule. But like you said, you can still file in family court for custody, and whatever order that the family court puts in place will override that DVPO custody order because it only lasts for a year. It cannot be renewed.
Right.
Can the protective order itself be renewed, though?
It can. It can be renewed for an unlimited amount of times, technically, for up to 2 years on each renewal. That is a possibility.
And what do you have to do for the renewal part of that?
You have to file a motion to renew before the original one expires. That's super important.
Very important.
Yeah. And then essentially, you're trying to show the court, you don't necessarily have to have this, but it's helpful if the other side has violated the order, if they have done things like, technically it's not a violation, but they're like toeing the line. That can be helpful. I think we had like an instance of this with somebody, they like approached the person too closely in the courthouse during like a custody hearing. And that was part of like our basis. And you also have to show that you're still in reasonable fear of them.
You don't have to show acts.
Right. You don't have to.
In that time period. If things were so bad before and you're just still in fear, then the court can renew it.
Yep.
And like you said, they can renew it up for 2 years. So you don't even have to wait, come back in a year. You can go back in 2 years and renew it again if you're still scared.
Yes.
I know that shooting in Raleigh recently where there's a domestic violence protective order involved, that woman had renewed it multiple times. There have been multiple protective orders.
Right.
And unfortunately in that situation, you see that, paper is only good so far as you can enforce it. And some people need more protection than that. So that it's obviously worst case scenario of domestic violence protective orders. But they're there for a purpose. They serve a purpose. And they're really important for people to have because it does give you that leverage when you call the police to say, hey, I have a protective order against this person. They're here. Or they're calling me. They're texting me. They won't leave me alone and they will get arrested.
Yes, for sure.
Any other advice to give our listeners if they're pursuing a protective order?
Yeah. So one big piece of advice that I have run into when I'm been defending against these with like with a person that doesn't have an attorney on the other side, is include everything you can think of in the complaint, no matter, even if it was 3 years ago. Yes, more recent stuff's the most important, I would say, but include everything, because there is case law in North Carolina stating that, if you don't talk about something in your complaint and it's not related to any other allegations, you can't bring it up at a hearing. And that has been a big problem for folks before.
Yeah, you have to allege it in the complaint so that the other party has noticed, technically, so they can defend against that specific allegation.
Yes.
And while you might say it in court, the judge is supposed to ignore it and not make it as a basis for the DVPO.
Yep.
So certainly include, I always tell everyone, include dates, include, as much description as you can. Think about all these instances that have happened, because some people, they start talking to me and they don't even realize that they're talking about domestic violence. I'm like, that is domestic violence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure we go into that on other episodes of what would qualify for domestic violence and the whole cycle of abuse and everything. But procedurally, it is important to listen to this episode as well and know the steps to take, because you can do it yourself. You can be a pro se party and obtain a domestic violence protective order. I see a lot when I'm in that courtroom.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's better for you to have an attorney to protect your rights if you're a defendant, and also to help you on the other side if you're filing, making sure that you include everything you need to include, have all your evidence, have everything printed, your exhibits and whatnot, so you can get that protective order when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a shout out to Legal Aid for representing victims of domestic violence. If you qualify for Legal Aid, they represent people for free. I know that they're overworked right now and they are turning down cases, so not everyone can get an attorney through Legal Aid, but there are resources out there.
Yeah, and don't think too that just because they're free, like they don't know what they're doing.
Oh, they do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They do it all the time. Yeah. So they're great.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need help with this, call us up at New Direction Family Law, and ain't that some
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review. You can visit us at newdirectionfamilylaw.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at the exitstrategy_podcast, or email us at exitstrategy@newdirectionfamilylaw.com. We'll be back next time with more no bullshit content about life, divorce, parenting, relationships, and everything in between.